Hi, and welcome. My name is Rachel Chambers, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Painted Brain. And welcome to our first annual Minority Mental Health Month event, one day at a time.
I'm going to move quickly on to the second topic of the evening, COVID-19 work and lifestyle adjustment. So I think I want to direct my person to Nakeya Fields. So I know at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of sort of quarantine, there was a lot of talk from mental health experts that there was going to be, increase in anxiety, stress, depression, because people would be self-isolating, wouldn't have as much contact as they're used to. So given that, and then in addition to the sort of social unrest that we're seeing right now, have you been seeing an increase of these symptoms, like realistically, in comparison to the years before? What kinds of conversations have you been having with other experts in your field, or with like common topics that have come up with your patients that you've spoken to?
You know what has been really interesting to me? We suddenly transitioned to a fully telehealth practice mid-March. It was not planned. We had already been doing maybe as needed appointments with clients who didn't want to come in or wanted to do it from home. So we had the infrastructure, but we really had to suddenly transition. And because we specialize in anxiety and trauma, many clients initially refused to do telehealth because there was a lot of anxiety around performance. Also, because of what the type of therapy we do, we are registered play therapists, and we do yoga. So there was adjustments being done. There was aromatherapy, a lot of breath work to help teach coping strategies, because we mostly work with children and their families, and helping adults work better with the children and teach them these breathing strategies early to address the trauma. So in the Black community, I believe that we have complex trauma, PTSD, as Alan mentioned, transgenerational trauma. It's through our veins. I don't know if you guys heard about the cherry blossom experiment, where there are these mice that were experimented on, and they were electrified and put cherry blossom scent in their cage. And then they were mated to female mice who never smelled the cherry blossom, and they had children, and those children had the same reaction as the male mice did. That trauma travels through, and it has traveled through for us as Black people. So the reason why I say as Black people in relation to my specialty in anxiety and trauma is that the people initially dropped off. As this pandemic continued for months, they all came back, not caring that there was telehealth. They just wanted to talk to somebody and connect to somebody. And in particular, I started to get a wait list of Black people, Black children, Black women in particular, because I'm now known out there to work with maternal health and work with families. And I have a reputation. So because people know that it exists, they are showing up, and they are waiting, and they are ready. So it's allowed a lot of opportunity for me as a business owner. And I have to put out there, everybody on this panel right now is being very productive. We are on a panel, we are working, nothing has stopped us. And that's the Black experience. We don't stop. We keep going. So what we are doing is we don't know how to rest, we don't know how to restore, and it's normal. So this COVID-19 pandemic isn't really affecting us. It's white clients, it's white families, right? So it's the Latino people who are like, hey, can I come talk to you? And then my Black people are like, let's check in a little bit. Could I do a little breath work with you, Nakeya? Let's do some art. But you know what? I did 10 things this week. I made $1,000 in a day. Like, people are doing amazing things because they have this ability. So if only we can recognize that we are building resilience, but also we need to pause. So it's been coming, it's been growing, but I think we as a people are handling it, but it's still hard and still hurts. So we still need to make a change. And I think all of us are seeing that we need to make a change. And that's why we're all still being productive, because we need to do something about it.
All right, well then kind of going off of that idea about like everything's been sort of contained to the home. It's a new experience everyone seems to be somewhat familiar with by this point anyway. I kind of want to direct my attention then to Drew Love. Drew, how have you been adjusting to being at home? I know you are a community activist, so how has that affected how you decide to like protest, to advocate for your rights and the rights of others? Someone with such a large platform, like how should other celebrities be using their voices to advocate for change as well?
It's interesting. Thank you for the question. It's interesting that you bring that up, because it's kind of like twofold, almost threefold. For me as a musician, my main source of income is usually touring, right? So there's no concerts, there's no anything like that. So we're like kind of forced to stay home and diversify our business mind, figure out other ways to make money. Now there's social unrest, and the highlight that's been placed upon it is kind of interesting, because you think about, if this COVID thing wasn't happening and people weren't forced to be at home, would there be as many people out on the streets protesting and doing all those things, right? If they didn't have the time, that they had to go to work and whatever, but people don't have to. So that, I think it's almost been a blessing in that way, that because these things have kind of intersected, the COVID thing and the whole Breonna Taylor and George Floyd situation have kind of intersected. It has allowed people to be more available to be out here and be more united on this front. You know what I mean? Whereas if it didn't happen, I don't know if people would have been, if there would have been as many mass numbers in the streets of Hollywood and things like that. That's a good thing. But as far as, I think that celebrities have been doing a decent job of using their platform to speak on these topics. But I think some people are a little afraid, because I don't know if maybe they're like trying to preserve their image, or trying to preserve, you know, what they got going on. Maybe they got an album rolling out or whatever, and they don't want to like interrupt with their, I don't know. I think that there have been celebrities and artists and people like that have spoken out in the past that have continued to do that. But I think that there are some that I know personally that do believe heavily in our plight and what we're speaking about, but for some reason feel like they don't want to speak about it publicly, socially, or anything like that. But I see them out in the streets on the protests, but they're not necessarily putting that on their social media for whatever reason. So I think that there's room for improvement there. But I think that we are doing a good job. There's always room for improvement, like I said, but COVID has forced people to be inside a little bit more, and force people to kind of diversify what their business mind, diversify what they're doing to make their money, but also to diversify, like it's forced people to sit down and think about different things that they haven't thought about before, right? Like whatever the public issues are, the social issues. And I think it's giving people a voice, right? Because they're sitting at home, they don't have anything else to do. So sometimes it gives people that courage and that want to like do a little bit more during this time. So I think it's been a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Thank you. I'd also like to, I guess, address my next question to the entire panel. Maybe starting with Theo Henderson, what are some to the sort of work lifestyle adjustments that you've been making? I know you run your own podcast. Like, how have you been adjusting to that, having to interview people? Can you touch on that?
Well, it's a good question. I practice martial arts, so I've already have had, even when I'm currently out on the street, I've always used draw from that. And though it has some of the yoga-like qualities to it, as it's a moving meditation, I utilize that as a coping strategy for the harshness of being unhoused, as well as the challenges that face basically. And I teach it as well. And I know that I also used another creative medium. I used one of the ways of, I guess in my own way of doing therapy, is using a cartoonist to educate people about the challenges that I have going on. And I want to educate them on what it is like to be unhoused. So I'm currently working on the third comic that we've had. The first two comics talks about the realities of a black unhoused man travailing through COVID-19, conversely, where a white woman who is more affluent could live and navigate the life. Also dealing with the NIMBYism that goes with being a black man that's unhoused and that kind of thing. So I think I use different kind of coping strategies in order for me to do that, as well as I'm also a in the closet foodie, and I love to watch cooking recipes. So I have to, not have that guilty pleasure, feel guilty because I have to also watch my weight. But I do get kind of, and I love to cook too. So that's one of my crosses I bear. So.
All right, well, thank you. Dr. Ashley, could you touch on some of your expertise? Like, what have you been doing to adjust to work and lifestyle during COVID?
I think that a lot of my coping strategies, is along with the clients that I work with, are things you do, right? Like, so when I ask people, what do you do to take care of yourself? I work out, I go do this, I go do that. And one of the things that I feel like has happened with this pandemic is that we can't do any of those things. So I didn't have any coping. So like, you know, an extra glass of wine started to become a good time every night, every single night. And cookies seemed like they were good at every meal. And so in addition to the problems that causes my weight and my general sense of like productivity, none of those things were adaptive. They were all maladaptive. So for me, one of the things I say to my clients and that I've had to do myself is to ask myself, not only, Wendy, what are you doing, but what are you not doing? What are you not doing, right? So yes, it's important to do. It's important to move your body. That's one of the best ways that we heal. Do martial arts, do yoga, do some breath work, but sometimes sit down, stop moving, stop. It's funny that, Nakeya, you were saying that your clients, people you work with are productive. Everyone I see is the opposite. Everyone I see feels incredibly heavy and tired. And these are folks who thought that if they made money, they could manage the privilege of being Black, the lack of privilege of being Black. If I made enough money, if I do well enough, like I'll be okay. And so for those people in particular, stopping, slowing down, spending time doing things that are rejuvenating becomes important.
Awesome. Dr. Lipscomb, could you touch on or follow up to what Dr. Ashley just said?
Yeah, definitely agree with what has been shared thus far. A couple of things that I'm engaging in that has worked is productive self-talk, right? So as opposed to what am I doing outside of the house, it's more so, did I get up? Did I take a shower? Did I make me something to eat? Am I going to bed on a time that I feel like is good for me to get enough rest? So productive self-talk, as opposed to just positive self-talk, and how am I being productive on the micro level. Also therapy, going to my therapist starting generative somatics, you know, embodying work, which has been great. And so therapy is another avenue. And then spaces like this, one of the things that has been great out of this is these virtual, Black affirming, unapologetically virtual spaces has been lit. Like, I'm seeing things all over, like group here for Black men. There are more Black focused resources now, visibly now, than I've ever seen before. And so this gives to me, this is part of my self-care and therapy and healing too. So I feel like we need to keep this up even beyond COVID, having virtual spaces. We have learned a lot from this. And I think it opens up avenues and access for our people in ways that they didn't have access before.
Thank you very much. Nakeya Fields, can you talk a little bit about what Dr. Allen just mentioned, just about like self-care during COVID? Like, how is that important? How have you been seeing your patients, you know, help themselves? How have you been actively trying to watch out for your mental well-being?
Well, you know, I am a proponent of self-care. I'm a self-described hedonist. I enjoy pleasure and feeling good and being happy. So I'd like to answer that by quoting Audre Lorde: caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And I think that's where we are right now. We must be, as political activists, in a war, because that's what we're in. And right now there are people who are wanting to be allies with us. It's been 400 plus years of intentional systemic redlining, the way resources are not allocated for us. There's a small amount of psychology. There's only 4% of Black psychologists in America. So when you think about all the Black people who have needs to be able to have a safe space for their therapy, the fact that they have wait lists and it's so limited is ridiculous, and that needs to change. And we need to recruit more Black people. We need to have people for Black people to go to talk about being a Black person and living a Black life, because white people, Latina people, no matter if they're person of color, Asian person, they don't have the Black experience, and that needs to be really delineated it and we have to demand it. And that's a part of our self-care, to demand what we deserve and what is our due. So we must treat our self-care and demanding our wellness as a part of what we expect. If we're working jobs, 2 and 3 jobs, then you need to quit one of them jobs and find a job that pay you better. You need to demand it and go find something. You have to transform your life. And the only way to transform your life is to be aware of what's not working for you and what's not serving you. And that means there's breath. And that means there's less reactivity and less living in the PTSD and the trauma that we have been socialized to within our systems. And we have to be aware that it exists. It's not our fault, and that we can make change. And I think that starts with breath. I think that yoga is a part of breath, but I'm a restorative yogi, so that's the rest yoga. And actually, that's the one that helps you lose the most weight. It's the one that impacts the immune system. It's the one that gets you into a parasympathetic state. And I think we need to educate Black people about that, and that's a power we came into this world with, and no one can take it away. And nature-based therapy, sunshine medicine, knowing that you have the sun, you have your breath, and you have a moment to pause, and that's enough to get some self-care in every single day. And you have to commit to it and love yourself enough to do it.
Okay, excellent. And then kind of to wrap up, Drew Love, what are some ways that you are caring for yourself as well? Or are you seeing people around you?
For me, it's just, this has been a time for me to branch out and do things that I haven't done for myself in the past, or as much as I would want to. So, you know, the basics, you know, I get out and hike a lot. I try to make sure I'm outdoors. You know, that sunlight definitely does wonders for you. As soon as you step outside, it just changes your whole mood. I may try to make sure I'm outdoors a lot more often than I am before. You know, little jog, hit like a mile or two every for a nice run. And then kind of touching on what somebody else had said earlier, just those positive affirmations and those things that you kind of talk to yourself and re-encourage yourself. You know, you're doing the right thing, and you're doing what you can in times like this, because it's really easy to feel seeing what everything else is going on. And I just try to make sure that I'm really, really positive, and a lot of positive encouragement to myself, and just a lot of exercise.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. That's going to conclude our sort of interview portion of the webinar.